And now, without any further delay, I'd like to turn today's presentation. This is Voice of the Customer featuring Portland State. Over to your first presenter, Sarah Linderman, Product Marketing with Adobe. Sarah, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Phil, and thank you to everyone who's on the line with us this morning. Really appreciate you making the time, and we're looking forward to putting on a great session for you today. So the focus is going to be bringing in one of our customers from Portland State, so you can hear directly from him what their experience with Adobe Sign has been like. And of course, that also gives a great opportunity for you to address any questions that you have for current users directly to one of them. Again, I'm Sarah Linderman. I'm in product marketing over here for Sign, directly in education. And I'm going to be joined by Justin Moore, who's the manager of digital workplace and infrastructure applications at Portland State. Quick preview of the session for today. I'm going to start by giving you kind of a quick overview of what it's like to go paperless with Adobe Sign, a little bit of context setting, and then we'll immediately jump into that conversation with Justin. It's going to be interview style, so we have a lot of great questions lined up. And then I will proceed to a little bit of wrap up, give you some resources and next steps, and then of course Q&A. So we'll have at least 15 minutes to do that, and as we're going through the session, as Phil had mentioned, you can feel free to pop any questions you have in your chat. You can ask questions on your mind that are about the product, and our product team can help answer them. You can ask questions directly of Justin about his experience after we've had that conversation. So whatever works for you. I also want to point out here on this slide that this session is just one of many. This is a series that we're running, and we have been running throughout the year. The next session we have coming up is on the 20th. That's getting started with Adobe Sign. That's really about the implementation process. So we talked to you about what it looks like to set up your admin and management console, how you get your workflows started. Really want to showcase how easy it is to start using Adobe Sign on your campus. On November 10th, we have a Going Paperless for Adobe Sign session. This is a great holistic overview. So if you have colleagues who really don't understand what it looks like to go paperless at all and have like kind of a lot of fundamental questions about the experience, that's a great session. And then on December 8th, we have a new session. This is going to be demystifying legality of e-signatures. We hear so many questions, and I kind of want to call it a little bit of a Mythbusters session almost, because it seems like there's just a lot of confusion and lack of transparency around when e-signatures are allowed to be used and are not allowed to be used, and really most of the time they are. So a great session to attend there as well. And then of course we have a whole bunch of content on demand, and at the end of this session we'll be sending out links so you can access all of that and find anything that looks interesting to you and share it out. All right, let's dive in. Before we dive in, a quick poll. A couple questions that we're going to pop up here for you. One, just curious, always like to see who's on the call. So indicate what your role is. And then why did you sign up for today? Apologies for the pun. What do you hope to get out of the session? What are you looking for? Feel free to type any quick answers to that. A lot of IT admin, some finance, some HR, procurement. Good to see these answers coming in. More info on Adobe Sign, of course. Trying to decide which e-signature platform. Hopefully we can convince you that Adobe Sign is the right answer. Better, wider use. Great. I think that all of these, to make your job easier, we would love to do that. I think we'll be able to address all of these. So thanks. Feel free to keep populating this. I'm going to go ahead and move us on into the content. All right, going paperless with Adobe Sign. So I always like to start with a little bit of a reality check. What's interesting is, as far as we are into the future, today nearly 80% of the workflows on a typical campus, and that's K-12 or higher education. And when I say workflows, it could be student-facing forms, staff-facing forms, vendor-facing forms. 80% of those are paper-based. It's an old school approach, right? Printing things out, signing them, scanning them, emailing them. It feels pretty archaic. And as you probably know, if you're on a campus that's still in this position, it's very inefficient. It involves so many steps. It's complicated, it's slow. And for anyone who's involved directly in managing those workflows or initiating them, it results in a whole lot of time spent doing admin work. And like any job, especially in schools, people are short on time. So the thing is, when you get rid of paper, you are able to address a lot of these pain points. Based on a recent IDC study that we had connected between routing, signing, approvals, tracking, staff spend an average of 30% of their time engaged in manual paperwork processing. This is something that's not just time consuming, it's also error prone. Over a third of surveyed staff cite that paper-based forms often feature missing signatures, initials, dates, they get signed by the wrong person, they get lost, they get misplaced. A million things that aren't supposed to happen can happen. And 63% of staff indicate that this overall gap in automation creates really an unsatisfying experience for them. Just to put some numbers around this, what we've seen that happens is for each transaction, that's one document that's going out for signature, a school can save an average of 1.5 labor hours by going digital. By reducing the time spent correcting these errors, schools can reduce their overall processing time by around 96%, which is really significant. And when you add up all of these hard costs and soft costs, you get to an average savings number of $6 per transaction. And I know that a lot of people say, that seems really high, but just to add some extra context around that, think of all the costs that go into it. There's printer paper, there's printer ink, there's the cost of running the printers, running the copy machines, there's the staff hours, all of that. When you roll it up, that's how we get to that savings numbers. And just to look at this from a bigger picture perspective, for every 20,000 forms that you take digital, this is savings of around $120,000 and over 30,000 labor hours, which is pretty incredible. There's also a great environmental impact here, just kind of going back to my previous point. You can see that for every 20,000 forms, again, using that same benchmark figure, that transition over to digital, you save a ton of water, you save 533 pounds of wood, you're saving energy, you're saving waste, you're making a positive impact on the environment. And we know that that's a top of mind issue for not only schools, but everyone in the world right now. So that alone is a great reason to take your campus to a more paperless space. So this is obviously where Adobe Sign comes in, and I want to start to get into the details of what exactly Adobe Sign is and how it works. So it's a cloud-based electronic signature service. That's kind of the simple definition of it. And what it's built to do is simplify, streamline, and secure the process of gathering information and gathering signatures. With Adobe Sign, users can send, view, manage, and legally sign documents from anywhere, anytime, from any device, including phones and tablets. And one thing to point out here, we often have people ask the question, if I'm sending out a document to parents and students or vendors, do they need to have an Adobe Sign app? Do they need to log on, sign in? No, they do not. They're not required to do anything except click the link, open it up, and sign. And another detail that I want to highlight is that Adobe Sign, well, it's called Sign, it actually does a lot more than just signing. What it's really meant to do is digitize the entire document processing workflow. So from document creation to collaboration to execution, tracking, archiving, it does all that. And furthermore, it keeps all of that data secure, it keeps it protected, and then it makes the related data really easily discoverable. And I think that data access point is something that's that it's often overlooked or maybe not cited as the big benefit that I think it can be. All right, so fleshing out that part of the story a little bit more and just kind of a visual re-emphasization about that last point about how comprehensive Adobe Sign is. So again, with Adobe Sign, you can quickly turn paper, Microsoft Office documents into PDFs, into fillable, signable forms. And of course, because we partner so well with Adobe Acrobat, it's really a seamless process if you're working with any PDF documents. You can then send them out for e-signature with just really a single click. And again, recipients can sign them from anywhere using a web browser. All your documents are going to be protected with really strict security measures, and they can be accessed and tracked and managed from anywhere in real time. And finally, Adobe Sign is built to integrate with other key systems on your campus, so you don't have to worry, or you can worry less about implementation challenges. And for any school who is using Microsoft Office 365, we have a really fully blown out, fleshed out integration with 365 that is free of charge, and it just plugs right in and starts working. So if you use Teams, if you use SharePoint, you can just automate the signing process from within those existing environments, which is awesome because it means that people don't need to open up another application, get into another environment. They can really do the e-signature process from within those places that they're already used to working. All right, where can you use Adobe Sign? Well, you can use Adobe Sign really anywhere. It's built to support workflows across the whole campus. And again, it's designed for K-12, HED, doesn't matter. It addresses all of those. It's a really great product for operational workflows. We hear so many schools that are using it for things like vendor agreements, all the procurement related documents, staff management, so onboarding forms, hiring forms. We hear use cases like academic research submissions. It's also really valuable for the student and alumni facing workflows if you're HED, like course management or donor forms. IEPs is a huge case that we hear about, release and permission forms, anything pertaining to device distribution or device management. All of those fall under the umbrella. In all of these cases, using paper-based forms and wet signatures, as I've noted, it really does require a ton of time. It requires all this cross-coordination between departments, individuals, and literally it requires legwork. So again, going paperless with Adobe Sign simplifies the routing procedures. It reduces the trips that you need to take to offices or campuses, and it gets things accomplished much faster. It's just a better experience. And we like to think that it helps to make life easier, a little easier, for the entire campus community or school community all the way around. All right, so obviously we know there's a ton of competitors out there that I will leave unnamed. So why would you take Sign over those other different options? There's kind of 5 things that we like to lean into and highlight about the Adobe Sign experience that we think makes it stand above the other solutions that you could go with. One is just Adobe's trust and credibility. We've been a leader in digital document solutions for a long time. We have a lot of guidance, we have a lot of expertise, resources, so we can make sure that you have that smooth implementation process. And again, we've just been working in education for so long, especially on the Creative Cloud side of the business. We understand education, we understand the specific needs there, and that just helps us become a better partner to you. The second point is ease of use. It's easy for the sender, it's easy for the signer, and hopefully when we get into the conversation with Justin, he'll be able to speak to that point a little bit. Again, our integrations, the fact that we're designed to integrate. It is the, Adobe Sign is actually the only preferred e-signature solution for Microsoft. And as I mentioned, we have this really full-blown integration with them that makes it so easy to use if you're operating on that, in that environment. Fourth point is the workflow management. We have made it easy for faculty, for staff, for admins to use design tools to really quickly and easily build and test and refine workflows. Nobody needs to use any coding here. It's a simple process to set up those workflows. So anyone at the institution can tailor them and automate them. They don't need to be a technical expert. And then finally, the last point I want to note is the compliance standards. Adobe Sign does meet the highest levels of global security and compliance requirements. We're using the same technologies and security engineering processes that are relied on by financial institutions, by governments, and of course by educational institutions all around the world. We like to think because of these strengths, that has helped us to garner the customer base that we have. To date, we have over 9 million organizations that are using Sign to process over 6 billion signature transactions annually. And just a quick sample of some of the schools that are using our product today. We have Cal State University at Fullerton. They're using Adobe Sign for admin forms and student ID cards, which is interesting. It's made their student ID card processing 6 times faster. It's also helped them reduce paper by around 50%. Iowa State University Foundation, 30% reduction in printing. And actually, we just brought in Iowa State University itself. They've kind of expanded their contract because they've been getting so much value from it on the foundation side. University of New Mexico, they're focusing their use on procurement workflows, POs, contracts, and they're able to get those completed in minutes. San Diego State University is an interesting case of using Sign in particular for the course management process, which is pretty arduous. It's a lot of signatures. It's a lot of back and forth for students and faculty. They've converted it over with Adobe Sign, and now it's 93% faster. We have a K-12 district in Texas, a very large district, and they're processing over 40,000 transactions per year. They're using Adobe Sign a lot with IEPs, with new hire paperwork, and the Microsoft integration has made it much easier to use for them in particular. One of our Ohio K-12 schools has really been able to manage through COVID. I guess this is a little bit more pertinent to last year, but also as they weather all the transitions going back in person this year, having Adobe Sign in place has really eased a lot of the admin burden for them. All right, and that is all from me. At this point, I'm going to turn the conversation over and then kind of start having a chat. I want to introduce Justin from Portland State. We're going to be having a chat with him about transforming workflows all across the campus. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Justin, to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into it.
Great, thank you. I'm Justin Moore, and I work as the Manager of Digital Workplace and Infrastructure Applications at PSU. And our team focuses primarily on administering infrastructure and software as a service applications, so things like Adobe Sign, Google Workspace, Qualtrics, telephony, call center applications, and things like that. So we get a lot of time working with stakeholders to identify their needs and work with them to find solutions in the applications we manage, and that gives us a lot of exposure to a wide range of business processes. And then I also worked for several years in our university's HR department as HRIS manager there, so that also gave me a lot of experience and background knowledge with many of the university's processes, and I think that was especially helpful when we were managing this implementation.
Great. Well, we're so glad to have you on with us for this webinar today. Really curious to kind of hear a little bit more about your experience so far. So where I'd like to start is just at the top. Talk to me a little bit about your impetus, the school's impetus for seeking out an e-signature and workflow solution. What challenges were you seeking to solve by going paperless?
Yeah, so we started searching for a solution around May 2020 or so. And for years we'd have departments purchasing individual subscriptions for their own departments, and usually the pain point is that when there was a discussion around a centralized solution, it's the bandwidth of setting it up and the cost of paying for it. And then when the pandemic hit, then suddenly we had a major increase in the number of departments that needed to move off of paper. And certainly paper processes kind of became untenable at that point. Like if you don't have folks on campus for a long period of time, most paper processes won't work very well or become very time consuming to digitize. So beyond those restrictions due to the pandemic, there were some normal paper-based workflow issues that stakeholders wanted to address that you talked about earlier in the presentation. But things like having to deliver documents all over campus, documents potentially going missing or being duplicated, being held up for signature, having to track down who's in the routing queue, so similar complaints.
Absolutely. And especially when you think about a really large university that has so many different departments, and it's even more complicated if they're trying to go paperless and they're all kind of doing it out of sync with each other. So I can understand that need also to find kind of a consolidated solution. When you started the evaluation process back in 2020, how many different options did you consider, and what were the evaluation criteria that you were using?
Yeah, we started off looking at 6 to 8 different e-signature solutions, and just because there were so many different needs and voices on campus being so decentralized, we had a really large project team for this, and most were campus stakeholders that were big e-signature users and had an idea already of the features they needed. So with that group, we were able to do kind of a first pass of the features that they thought would be required and those that would be more optional or desired features. And then we sent out a survey to campus stakeholders to get a better feel for things like what they wanted to see in a product, how much they were using e-signatures, how many senders they had, and just otherwise kind of loop them into the conversation. And that did help us identify a few other things that we hadn't considered originally, like the maximum number of recipients that people actually needed, and features like proxy sending and signing. And from a central perspective, we also wanted to make sure we had some core enterprise features as well, so like SSO, FERPA compliance, strong audit trail, and strong digital accessibility. And I want to say we had around 35 or so different data points that we compared for each of those 6 to 8 solutions to try and narrow things down.
So it was a pretty comprehensive process. And do you mind my asking, what are some of the different options that you considered, obviously outside of Adobe Sign?
We looked at some of the other ones we looked at were like DocuSign, HelloSign, PandaDoc, SignNow, and a few others as well.
Okay. So when you think about those and then you think about the evaluation criteria that we're using, ultimately, what was it about Adobe Sign that made it the best choice for you?
Sure. A couple of things come to mind. The first was definitely price. We purchase our transactions through OETC as a reseller, and the way that the contract is set up, there's no overage charges for us if we need to buy more transactions during the year, and the whole package resets on the anniversary date. So that was really nice for our pricing model, because our IT department is currently assuming the risk for any unused transactions purchased. So in year one especially, where it's harder to predict what the actual usage would be, that kind of put our mind at ease a little bit and made it a little simpler to do internal billing. And it's kind of nice to have that fresh start each year too. It was also cheaper per transaction than a lot of the solutions we were looking at. So especially for smaller units that were feeling the budget pinch, it was a lot more feasible for them to start using e-signature when perhaps in the past they felt like it was out of their price range. The other part of it was that it was probably the closest product to DocuSign that we evaluated, which was especially important when it came to digital accessibility, because we evaluated several that ended up not yet being accessible. So most of our current users had individual accounts through DocuSign already, so there was already some expectation for a similar experience there. And all in all, I would say that there's a lot of similarities between the two, and for the most part, it kind of comes down to smaller features or quality of life things. So, on one hand, there are a few quality of life things in Adobe Sign that would be nice to see that people miss from DocuSign, like if you make an error in the number of recipients, being able to go back and more easily change or add or remove rather recipients without starting a transaction over. But these are mostly things that weren't showstoppers, but they did require a little bit of a process change for people that are used to a different business process. But on the other hand, some things that have been really nice with Adobe Sign were like workflows in conjunction with templates, and some of our power users that had pain points with some other e-signature solutions have actually been able to cut down on the number of transactions and touch points that they need by using workflows. And then the web forms have also been kind of a lifesaver for a couple of our units as well.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought those points out, because I like to think that it tethers back to the ease of use that we like to promote with our products. So it's good to hear that you're finding some of those features really do make life easier for the people that are, power users, just users in general that are sending out a lot of documents. Let's talk about getting Sign up and running. So you've chosen the solution. Now it's time for implementation, which we know can be a real beast. So what was the experience of getting Sign up and running like? And if you can talk about change management a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, overall, I would say it was pretty straightforward. We went live in January of this year, and I think it was around October that we started implementation, October, late September. And it was nice that the onboarding and setup costs were included as part of the contract just based on the number of transactions we purchased. And so we were able to get some training set up that we were able to record from AFDIA that were kind of a self-service resource on things like basic features, advanced features, and then we had a training for our administrators too. Just generally as a software as a service application, the application itself is a lot easier to set up. So essentially our project team just had to methodically go through the configuration pages for that initial setup, and then effectively it was ready to use. It of course takes a little bit longer to do things like SSO and or set up our internal billing and things like that, since that took more identity management and API work. But we were able to get it all function as expected and on time, and I think it went great overall. One of the pain points we had with the admin console in our setup is we had to add users to the admin console and then separately add them to Adobe Sign. So that's been a little bit of a challenge for our administrators to add users in as a two-step process, but we are hoping to set up user sync in the near future to alleviate that. Other than that, on the note of change management, we did communicate a lot with our interested stakeholders during implementation. We reached out early in the project to see who wanted to stay in the loop. And then we worked with some of our bigger units as pilot groups for roughly 3 months before it went live, and I very strongly recommend the pilot groups. We learned a whole lot during that period that made the full go live rollout more successful, whether that was how we configured the application, workarounds or fixes for like pain points, or just how to successfully administer the application without running into any errors.
Awesome. Well, how about the way that you're actually using Sign? The Sign use cases. What are some of the departments that are using Sign? What are the workflows that you're tackling?
Yeah, we've had more units sign up than I expected anyway, and I think we've had a quicker conversion from other applications like the decentralized ones we were using on campus. Probably our biggest users right now are our sponsored projects unit, research and graduate studies, our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and our College of Education. Right now we're on pace to use around 15,000 transactions this year, but we're still seeing some growth, so hopefully that continues as we get the word out more. Right now I would say most of our use is around administrative type forms, so things like HR, grants, and finance. I don't think we've had as many on the student side yet, but I think that's traditionally because we've had more student-facing digital tools available already, so like through our ERP or CRM systems, and so they've had other ways to authorize or authenticate things rather than paper or PDF documents.
So you're using it in a lot of different ways, and it sounds like you're continuing to kind of expand out those use cases and get more tractions and flow more transactions through. So what is the initial feedback looking like? Like, what would you say the impact of Sign has been? What are the benefits that the school is experiencing? And when you think about that, I'd love to hear from from the different angles of the different audiences, from staff versus faculties, different departments.
Yeah, again, on the student side, there's been a little less usage there than expected, although the web forms have been very helpful there. But again, I think that has more to do with existing digital tools there. For the administrative and staff side, e-signature I think it's definitely helped to improve and speed up what used to be paper processes, like even when our users are using the most basic functionality of the product. And then that is even more when they're using the more advanced features. So I'm hoping over the course of the next year, we're able to put more time into like training and consulting with departments to leverage more of those advanced features. And we do definitely see, like in some of our colleges like liberal arts and sciences where they are using workflows heavily, that they have made a lot of process improvements and saved time and effort there.
Awesome, which is exactly what we wanted to do and what we want to hear. Just kind of a bigger question. How would you say that this whole process of digitizing your workflows and bringing Sign in, how does that fit in with your school's overall digital transformation goals?
It's a really great starting point for sure. I think, we're at the point that most of our users are still, again, focused on more of the basic features. But again, hopefully we're able to kind of convert more of those to power users this year to take advantage of the full set of features that Adobe Sign has. From a digital transformation perspective, I think what I really like most about software as a service tools in particular is just that and Adobe Sign is that it gives the basic and advanced features more directly to users or like group administrators. And I think that can really help to promote a culture of innovation and digital transformation if departments have that self-service capability and don't need to rely on like an IT department specifically or developers specifically to make every single process improvement that involves technology. So I think this kind of helps to keep innovation happening across the university, but also can help to free up development time to go more towards like student-facing projects and initiatives.
So it's better use of time. It's also just kind of, it sounds like almost like building confidence or building competence among your non-IT people, non-technical people, because they're able to kind of figure things out a little bit more easily themselves and do more. They're empowered.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So I just have one more question for you, and I think that you've done a really nice job in your answers of kind of threading this throughout, but what final points of advice would you offer to any schools, because there are probably some on the line who are looking to go paperless right now?
I think change management was probably the biggest one for us, especially when you likely have a lot of decentralization or shadow systems, staying in frequent contact with stakeholders and giving them opportunities to give feedback and input is really critical, especially because a lot of them have had opportunities to sign up for these individual accounts already. So it can be a challenge to kind of bring everyone together. Pilot groups and soft launch were really helpful too. Like I mentioned earlier, that really helped to work out a lot of the bugs and process issues we had before we released it to the campus. And then I think finally just kind of starting small and growing the service over time. So we pushed out a few of our more advanced deliverables that we had on our radar to kind of a second phase. So, things like user sync or doing additional document backups or more training and consulting resources. So I think just getting it out the door with the basics done right was enough to really meet the business needs of most of our stakeholders, and that still gets them the benefit of the product sooner.
Great. Thank you. I think it's so helpful to hear this. I mean, because obviously we can say these things, but it's certainly just not the same. It's not the same impact as hearing it directly from people who are in your shoes and using it and having the experience. So thank you so much. I imagine we'll probably have some questions for you. But again, Justin, thank you. This has been a great conversation. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up and then, like I said, move us over to Q&A. So everyone on the line, feel free to drop your questions into the chat, or we'll queue those up and then we can open the stage and hear from Justin directly on those. All right, so wrapping up, just a couple more slides here. First is a quick poll. I'm always curious, what are some future topics you might like to see us cover in other webinars? I gave you a preview of other content that we already have, but feel free to go ahead and drop in that question. Oh, you know what? It looks like the poll's not matching what's up there, but that's okay. We can get these questions too. If you do have thoughts on future webinar topics, though, feel free to just drop that into the question and chat area. All right. So before Q&A, some next steps. I've got 3 of them. The first is just a recommendation to check out and share some additional resources that we have around Sign. One is our savings calculator tool. It's pretty cool. It's a little interactive PDF that you can download. I think that we have the links for those, and we'll be sending them out after the fact as well. But it's a neat tool that you can download and customize to your school to estimate how much you'll be able to save in terms of time and money by going paperless with Sign. We also have a resource hub that is filled with tons of information. We have ebooks and white papers, case studies, a whole bunch of good stuff on there. So that's a great place to visit. And then there's a document on there in particular that's just about going back to school at the Adobe Sign that I guess is a little bit late at this point, but I still think tells a nice story about kind of getting prepped to go paperless. Again, second next step, join us for those future webinars. We have the dates here. This information, again, will all be sent out in the recap email. And then finally, a third next step, if there is specific information that you want, particular to your own school or university, or you'd like to set up custom demos, we're more than happy to do that for you. Feel free to contact your rep, or you can just drop your email in here again, and we will get in touch with you directly. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and move us into Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Mike, who is going to queue up some of the questions. Thank you again. And Mike, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so a couple of great questions came in specifically for Justin, and you touched on some of these. So the first one is kind of related to the implementation process, but the question is, to what extent do you engage in process review and redesign before actually going forward with implementing new technologies such as Adobe Sign? Maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, I think in this case, because we had a lot of decentralized processes happening around anyway, as far as how departments set up their own like templates and workflows and things like that, we essentially left it to them, but we were and have and continue to be available to kind of consult on those things. So we have had users kind of come to us and ask for, what's the best way to set up this process, and then we, have a meeting with them to discuss. Since it was a brand new application, we were essentially starting from scratch, so we weren't necessarily doing a redesign or process review compared to an existing process. So as far as the app itself, not as much. And then as far as individual processes within Adobe Sign, that's kind of been on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, makes total sense. That's great. And we've also seen a lot of success from some of our other customers where it's always better rather than directly going one-to-one where I have a paper form and I want to transform this into an e-signature supporting document. Sometimes it's a good idea to look at those and you can maybe simplify the way the documents are actually structured to make it a better experience rather than just purely going, okay, I'm going to digitize this and then put it into the new system I'm implementing. So definitely a lot of room for improving the way things are done and making more efficiencies. Another question here for you. So obviously Adobe Sign supports workflows where you're getting multiple signatures on a single document and you can do a lot of automation around that. Have you had much experience establishing workflows where you are capturing multiple signatures from multiple signers on the same document? And maybe if you can talk a little bit about how that, if that's something relevant.
Yes, yeah, we definitely have had workflows with multiple signatures. That was actually our first use case for it. Is it's not just having multiple signatures, but having sometimes where certain signatures are optional and other signatures are required. And that was an area where it was more repetitive to do it through the typical sending experience, but with workflows, you could just create basically one template that they could use. So like for grants processing, there were a number of roles that were optional and a number of roles that were required. So it could range from 3 to 6+ signatures on it, and workflows really helped with that to save our sponsored projects group a lot of time sending out those transactions.
Yeah, that's great. And the feature that Justin was referring to is inside of Adobe Sign. It's called Workflow Designer. If that's the one you were referring to, we have a couple different ways, but with the Workflow Designer, you can definitely automate very complex scenarios where you have multiple signers, some are optional, some aren't, various different email updates where you'll CC to different recipients, so you can really build things as complex as you need it to be. And then if you want to even go further, Adobe Sign works great with Microsoft tools like Power Automate, and that can really enhance what you can do with it as well. So then a couple other questions here, less specific to you, Justin, just kind of questions around the features and capabilities of Adobe Sign that I can kind of tackle some of these for us here on the call. So one question is, inside of Adobe Acrobat, there's a tool called Fill and Sign, and I'm imagining a lot of people on the call today already have Acrobat within their institution. Acrobat comes with Creative Cloud. You can buy Acrobat separately. So within Acrobat is a tool called Fill and Sign. What's the difference between Fill and Sign and Adobe Sign? So that this question comes up a lot. And the easiest answer to that is Fill and Sign is used when you need to sign something, but it wasn't sent to you directly through Adobe Sign, where you just have a flat PDF file or a Word document or a physical piece of paper that you just need to sign and get that back to somebody. So you can use fill and sign to attach your signatures to it, but there's no authenticated users, there's no audit trail, none of the security and compliance that's part of Adobe Sign is part of it. That's more of using fill and sign to do a simple signature on a document that you personally need to sign and provide back to someone. Adobe Sign is obviously a tool that works across the entire institution where you are building your documents for others to sign, so that way they're directed to click exactly where they need to click and sign and fill out the information. All the data is captured and stored with all of the authentication and security and the audit trail that shows who signed it, when, where, and everything is stored. So a huge difference, and having fill and sign is definitely not a replacement to using Adobe Sign. And Sarah, how much do we have time for another question, or should we start to wrap up?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question, Mike.
Let's look through here the list of questions. So I'll do one other question, but a quick follow-up for fill and sign is, does it have legal binding? It has legal binding in the fact that an e-signature is legal, because an e-signature is really just confirming that you have signed a document, but the full breadth of legality for e-signatures, and this is actually a great topic that we'll cover on one of the upcoming webinars that Sarah mentioned, the full legality behind an e-signature requires 3 different elements, which is the identity of the person signing it, to basically show where are we capturing that this person is who they are that's signing it, the integrity that the document after it's signed can't be modified, and the intent to show that you have explicitly signed something, so it can't automatically capture your signature when you open the document, for example. So fill and sign covers most of those except for the identity piece, because there's no way for it to prove that you are the one signing the document. With Adobe Sign, there's a lot of different ways to capture the identity of someone, and this is up to the institution in terms of how advanced of an identity authentication do you want to do. Do we want to do 2-factor SMS, identity authentication, a simple password? We can even do things as complex as having you authenticate with a government issued ID. So the identity piece is a really big part of legality for e-signatures, and this is something I think we'll have to talk about in this upcoming webinar. The last question here to kind of cover is, so we talked about workflow to kind of automate a lot of different signatures, but does Adobe Sign have a bulk sending feature? So to separate between bulk sending and having just multiple signatures, we're talking about when you have a single document that you need multiple people to sign, but in a lot of use cases, you'll have a single document that you need to distribute out to all of your faculty, all of the students, all of the parents, and you don't want all of those signatures all on the same document. So Adobe Sign does have a tool called Bulk Send, where you just need to upload the document once, prepare it for signature, upload your list of recipients, and it sends it out one by one to each one, capturing them all separately, where you can track and manage and everything. So a very powerful tool as well. With that, let me hand it back to Sarah and Phil to close this out for today. Thank you for these great questions, and if we didn't get back to you on the Q&A pod, we'll definitely respond to you one by one there as well.
Great, thank you, Mike, and thanks again, everyone, for joining. Especially thank you to our guest, Justin, for coming on and sharing your story in such a great level of detail and being so comprehensive about it. We really appreciate that. Great questions. I also love the future topic that people have dropped in there in terms of workflows and web forms. All great suggestions. And I think starting in January, we're going to be fully refreshing our webinar content. So this gives us some really good ideas to seed in for what we can present. That is all I have. Again, everything is available on demand. And we have more webinars, so you'll be receiving a wrap up with all that information, and feel free to reach out to us with anything. But that is all from me, and just a thank you for joining us. Hope this session has been useful and impactful for you.